Hi everyone. Welcome
Hello.
to the second Global XR Talks this year, and we have two incredible, cool VR sessions. So you know a little bit more about that, Saskia. So
Well, our first session that I'm super excited about. For that, I am super happy to welcome our two speakers, the founder and CEO of Clever Books, Dr. Darya Yegorina, and her co-founder, Dr. Ina Armstrong. Hey,
Hi.
welcome.
Hi, guys.
We're excited to be here and we're excited to talk about the XR, but this time we're going to talk about augmented reality. So everybody's
Awesome.
ready?
Thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait to hear about all the crazy things you do about with AR and education and homeschooling. And maybe you want to introduce each other or
Oh yes, we're going to do that in a second. Just let me share the PowerPoint so you can see our nice pictures there. Hold on a second.
While you're sharing your presentation, I will start with the introduction if you don't mind. So I'm here to introduce Dr. Darya Yegorina, who is a co-founder, a founder and a co-founder of Clever Books. She's a very inspiring person. But on top of that, she is a visionary leader who is on a mission, on a global mission, to impact the digital transformation in the education sector. So I'm very proud to be part of the team and work closely with her. So here we go.
And thank you so much, Ina. And let me introduce the person who helps the kids around the world to see, hear, and touch the knowledge together with me. Dr. Ina Armstrong. She is a fantastic ex-educator. She is a passionate mom who knows a lot about tech and who is inspiring her kids to use all the digital hacks and everything. So and I think it's the passion to educate, passion to learn more about technology and everything together that actually drives us and motivates us to help kids around the world. Now, let's have a look at what we have for you ready today. And we are welcoming any questions you might have, even if they are right now, live streaming, or later on. And any questions anytime are welcome. So before that presentation that we're going to dive in and show you how augmented reality is saving the education, I would like first to give you an overview of what happened last year for those who are not really connected that much with schooling or education. Well, first of all, how COVID has changed education. We know that education sector budgets were so small that they were not thinking of buying a lot of tech. They were not thinking of buying a lot of hardware or software or anything. So it's going to be even less money post-COVID because they will be struggling with the budgeting and they will be struggling on finding the way to do the remote schooling. And the interesting thing about that, and I want to ask Ina if she remembers our conversations at the beginning of pandemic with different educators, how the situation was. Do you remember what they were saying about being ready or not being ready for the remote schooling?
Absolutely. That was quite an interesting discussion we had. So we arranged a panel with, I think, 6 or 7 educators, all the way starting from China to including the European educators and the American.
And Mongolia was there. Mongolia, you remember?
That's correct. And it was very interesting to see because the people in the Asian part, they were already going through week 3 or 4 of lockdown. In Europe, we were just starting to have that. And the States were still open, I think, or just starting the closure. So it was quite interesting to actually exchange of the experience and for our American colleagues to see actually how to work things out from the experience of college colleagues who have already been under quarantine for quite some time. But yes, many schools were not ready. Many did not have any hardware to provide to the kids. And actually, some of the schools have really stopped the educational process when the whole pandemic and the lockdown hit. Did you remember the conversation that we had with some of the our colleagues from the States that they were saying about not being ready?
Yeah, so of course, not being ready, meaning that they knew that education technology existed. They knew that there are so many tools out there, but they were not thinking really that something like this might hit, and they might need to, in the week's time, they need to move everybody and for studying remotely. So that meant actually no schooling for many kids. And if you have a look at this chart, you can see that no schooling was for many for those kids in these countries for the whole year, and it might continue even further. Not being ready, meaning that they were lagging behind with knowing that education technology was there. They were thinking and were being reluctant to using it, and these times never come. We might be ready for that, and if something like this happens, we can figure out quickly. But it didn't happen, and that actually created a lot of inequality because there were so many delays in distance learning. Not everybody was ready to create these learning management systems. Not everybody was ready to entertain the kids the way they could be in the classroom. Not everybody was ready for everything that happened last year. But the thing is that actually created learning loss. And learning loss might seem to be to us like, oh, well, okay, kids missed school for a couple of months. That's not a big deal. Actually, it is. Learning loss is the economic loss because those kids are actually lacking the knowledge that they could have got when they were starting at school. And that created a massive problem already. But we might ask the question, was there really no attack? Ina, what do you think? Was there really no attack at all?
Absolutely not. EdTech, as we know, have been on the market for quite some time, and we can definitely see how businesses adjust to digital technologies and digital tools that are out there. However, we could definitely say that the education sector was quite behind and still is quite behind. So obviously, a lot of schools and educators who are passionate about technology, who are interested in innovation, we're bringing on board hardware or software solutions just to make sure that to differentiate the learning process and integrate part of those technology as a supplementary material and in fact as part of the core curriculum as well. But I think there were still many schools that were teaching in traditional way, and I think that's what created this inequality and not readiness, because although educators knew exactly that education technology, it should be part of the educational process, but not having that on board when the pandemic hit, I think that's what made a very big difference. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. And the interesting part of it as well is that in many cases, the people who tried the EdTech and they were trying that prior to the pandemic, they were not really getting ready to the pandemic or any sorts of these kinds, but they were actually learning something new on how to utilize the technology to drive the innovative approaches in the education. But the interesting thing that even people, when they went for homeschooling, the parents, and I actually was one of them, and I want to complain officially that I was completely distracted because my kid in the age of technology in a European country had to receive her homework by email to my email, and I have to then supervise her doing the homework, and then she would be taking pictures, and I would have to send those pictures to the teacher at school, which is absolutely ridiculous because I have my own job and I need to do it, and it was really difficult to cope with that. But you know what it also created? Those kids who were having the living cert grades, they actually faced inequality. And Ina can give her example of being one of those because her son actually was at the living grade last year. Can you share your experience?
Absolutely. We were actually very lucky and very excited that when the pandemic hit, by the time it was graduation, my son actually had the opportunity to graduate, although it was quite an interesting experience of having a class picture of kids standing 1.5 meter away from each other, and the photographer being on top of a 3-meter ladder to take picture of all of them, try to fit them in one picture. So that kind of was quite an interesting experience, but again, finishing without the official exams, and also being forced to wait for a longer period of time when the grades were calculating based on predicted grades, based on the overall performance. So it was very different experience, and many students were seeing that the grades were unfair, and which eventually actually costed them places at the universities.
Yeah, so that was the situation, and the education was completely disrupted. And the interesting thing that I was talking about the education being in a sort of analog age compared to the business, where everybody is in digital age and talking about digital transformation. So finally, education was one of the industries that was completely disrupted by digital, and that actually costed schools who were not adopting technology at the end, really big stakes and big money, and a lot of students and a lot of learning losses, and a lot of bad things happening to kids. And I think it's unfair because it was at the end of the day the kids who were having these troubles and facing this problem. Now, good to the fun part. So how augmented reality actually helped the education? The interesting thing about that is that during pandemic, a lot of providers of augmented reality and virtual reality and other education technology, they have supported with the free resources. But the question is, were the resources actually in use? Ina, can you share your experience? What have you learned from the educators? Which resources have they used and how they selected them?
That was quite an interesting aspect because obviously when the pandemic hits, there are a lot of educators and a lot of organizations who are trying to build databases of educational resources to share it with educators worldwide to actually equip them with all the necessary tools and links where they can find the resources based on experience of other educators who are already using that. And interestingly enough, augmented reality has become quite a significant aspect of remote learning, because the biggest challenge that teachers were facing is how to keep the kids actually focused and for a longer period of time when they were conducting Zoom meetings, and how to keep them excited and motivated and wanting to wake up in the morning and actually go to class. So this is when augmented reality actually was playing quite a significant aspect, and kids were so excited and so motivated to see, figures coming to life, and the teacher presenting, let's say, a marker in front of them, and the kids were having their telephones facing the cameras on the device and experiencing that exciting way of learning, and they wanted to explore further. They had this wow effect. They wanted to know more. They were asking questions, they were participating more in the class. And I think that's something that every teacher really wanted to see, that the learning curve is still there, see that they're very excited, they still having the motivation to go to class, and then after the class finish, they still have the energy to actually learn more and perform.
Yeah, that's a good point here. And the interesting thing about the augmented reality, we're not going to talk about what is augmented reality, because in XR Talks, everybody's actually know what is AR at the end of the day. But the interesting thing about augmented reality, it can help with a lot of things. And why we like saying at Clever Book, seeing, hearing, and touching the knowledge, because that's exactly what augmented reality does. And if we talk about digital natives, who the kids are at the end of the day, they require this digital learning. They require access to devices because they are all the time trying to access the information, and the information is available now at their fingertips. They don't need to go to the library or somewhere else. They just, go and take the device from parents or their own if they have one, and it already drives their motivation to explore the world further. So they have a different learning curve, and that's why augmented reality was one of the key tools that actually helped during the pandemic. So why augmented reality actually helped in the way that it supported the education. So first of all, it has engaged students in learning, and it has engaged students in learning regardless they had internet connection or they didn't have internet connection, because at the end of the day, having the mobile app installed and having the marker, or if it's a markerless solution, it just created that environment for them to play and entertain themselves. It has maintained the kids' attention and focus during the lessons, as Ina said. And that's the feedback that we have received from the educators in different countries. When they were trying to create those engaging lessons, even to bring the magic on the screen by showing a marker-based solution with the with the AR, and asking kids to face the device of their parents or their own devices on that screen, that helped a lot to create this wow effect. So that was bringing the different lessons of travels to different countries, although you are sitting at home, of learning about different animals when you would be going like that to the zoo or something like this, sitting in at your desk. It was helping a lot of making the abstract content in geometry like absolutely understandable, because they were visual. And maybe you can go ahead and talk about other aspects of the augmented reality support, how it supported the education in pandemic.
Yes, I think another aspect is enable the simulations of something that is not otherwise possible. And just watching a video even becomes a little bit boring for the kids. It's just consuming the content, but the whole part comes from the interacting with the content that is more valuable for the students, where they can actually navigate and explore themselves what they do.
Maybe creating as well. Creating the content is also a cool part.
Absolutely. And so that's what actually kind of creates this learning environment that is more dynamic. And so where this energy coming from, and the excitement, the whole curiosity part comes from. So which sparks eventually the curiosity of wanting to learn more, and opens the other opportunity for virtual trips and creating and showcasing the environment that you can't bring to the classroom, or you can't bring to your home.
Thanks a lot. And by the way, what we have noticed as well, following the educators that are innovators and those who are early adopters of technology in their classrooms, parents were actually engaged a lot in the homeschooling, and for them it was also important to explain somehow in a fun way the maths or geometry or some science aspects, and that's where augmented reality actually supported their efforts in helping kids to learn.
That's actually quite an interesting point that you said, because it's not only from a teacher perspective that showcasing and integrating the augmented reality resources in the education sector, education environment was helpful, but also it helped the parents who needed to support the kids during the homework time, etc. They were also able to address those homework environments in a more fun and engaging way by using the augmented reality resources. So actually many educators passed along all the resources they had available to a parent community, so they were able to use that with their kids at home.
Yeah, and the interesting thing that, like, what could be better if you can explain your kid how the science works, how you can launch the rocket to space, if you just, open the app, take the information from there, and in an interactive way, you just assemble the rocket together with your kid and showcase and send it to space. It's a kind of play and learning environment at the same time. And before the pandemic, we had a lot of conversations with the homeschooling parents and the homeschooling associations in different countries. The interesting thing there, that even at that point of time, they were really engaged, and they told that augmented reality supports those explanations. Sometimes you can draw something on a piece of paper, But it's not the same way where you can show this 3D dimensional object and it's available at your fingertips. And sometimes people think like, oh my God, this technology looks so cool. It might be so expensive. Actually, it's not. In many cases, you can have a lot of free stuff out there, and it's really supportive in the teaching and learning process, regardless if you are a teacher or a parent. And I think that even beyond the pandemic state, beyond the lockdown, for any parent who wants to support their kid in learning, they can use the augmented reality resources just to explain the school subjects if it's not really clear for the kids through the textbooks or the explanations of the teacher in the classroom. But let's see, what can augmented reality actually do and how it was used during the lockdowns? So Ina, maybe you can drive us through the field trip.
Bring the elephant to the classroom. So that was quite an exciting example that some of the teachers did as part of the lesson, is to create a field trip to Africa and bring all the animals that live in the African continent and give the opportunity to the kids to explore all those animals in a 3D dimensional way, touch them on the screen, bring them forward to life, and also look from different perspective, hear what sounds they make, and also better understand the whole environment that they live in. And it's something very magical that happens when the kids do have the opportunity to have this imaginary experience where they actually become part of it.
Yeah, so Cleverbooks was supporting in the way that we were providing the free mobile application that helps kids actually to learn different continents and travel through the geographies. And you can learn these different animals. You can interact with them. You can hear the sound, so that's why it comes about hearing. You can touch the animals, and you can also feed them and interact with them in a way like you would be in the zoo. So essentially, you're traveling through African savanna, meeting the animals, meeting the plants, meeting everything. And the interesting thing about that lesson is that teacher created not only that as a journey, but also put different quizzes around so kids could explore more on their own through the digital content rather than just focusing on the illustrations in the book or just scrolling through the animals and so on and so forth. The teacher has done this lesson right online and provided the kids with the material to work on their own. And the feedback was amazing because the engagement was a lot higher compared to the standard textbooks.
And remember, the kids have remembered almost everything that they've learned in that lesson. So we're talking about 100% retention rate, and the increase in knowledge is tremendous.
Yeah, and so then other lesson that we want to share and how Cleverbooks help is that we heard from the teacher who is teaching mathematics in the primary grades, and during the period of pandemic they had these lessons in geometry. And geometry had 2D shapes, 3D shapes. The interesting thing is that explaining 2D shapes is quite easy. You just draw something on a piece of paper and you're good to go. But it becomes a little bit more difficult if you try to do something with the video and you try to showcase something which is 3D dimensional. So there is no better tool to do that as augmented reality. So for that specific lesson, the facilitation was through the augmented reality application and also through the web-based augmented reality, which is actually gaining the popularity as well among schools, because many classrooms around the world still don't have the mobile devices as such, and it's difficult to adopt the technology like augmented reality that might require the camera at the back of the device in order to produce the augmentation and the overlay of the imaging. So the some classrooms might require the web-based AR, which we have through our augmented classroom resource, and it was extremely helpful for the teachers who claim that their kids they don't have just simply the mobile device at home to have this experience, and how to explain the cross section like you see in this motion picture, or how to explain the 3D dimensional fractions. there is no easy and fun way better than the augmented reality to do that. So the feedback was that explanation of what is a cube, explanation what is a sphere, and how you can cut it in semispheres is it became so much easier. And also we got a really interesting feedback from specific classrooms and the kids with special needs who might need a little bit more time to engage with the content, a little bit more effort from the teacher. It actually relieved the teachers because they showcase once on how to use the app, and then the student could do as many repetitions as it was required for him personally to develop the knowledge about specific subject. So we're talking here about augmented reality also helping to personalize the approach to learning and help kids to engage with different senses while interacting with the augmented content. Maybe Ina, you took us through diving into the waters.
Absolutely. And I think it's a good point that you mentioned in regards to inclusivity of students with special needs. And what we've learned from different educators is that those kids were the ones who haven't had much support during the remote learning time. And again, augmented reality resources were actually quite a good contribution towards their academic achievement and towards making the lessons for them more interactive, more engaging. And that was provided to their parents and also through personalized Zoom conferences specifically to tailor the needs of those students who have learning difficulties or a delay in certain aspects, learning aspects. So for example, diving into the sea, and one way is to learn about the underwater animals is when you go to see different pictures, you see different videos, etc. And a completely other experience is actually when you feel like you're part of the ocean, like you're diving deep, down deep, and you have all those fish right around you swimming, and you have the opportunity to look and explore and see and learn, and then you remember. And this imaginary aspect, I think it's quite crucial for students at primary level, because that's what really empowers their learning, is to imagine how it would be, and that's how they remember, they learn, and then they want to explore more.
And talking about imagination is an extremely important thing in the learning process. And I think augmented reality is one of the key tools that supports that, together with the virtual reality as well. Why imagination is so important? We never think of that, but imagination actually drives innovation. It drives innovative way of presenting and looking into things, and drives creativity. And I think one of the key parts in every learning process is to keep this imagination. And there is an interesting statistic that actually says that kids till the age of 12 have a broad imagination, like really crazy one. And then it decreases. At the age of 12, it's getting less. At the age of 20, it's getting less. And at the age of 20 plus, it's even going nowhere, because we are putting the standard education process on everybody. We are telling people here what you need to do, because this is correct and this is incorrect. But for imagination and creativity, there is nothing correct and incorrect. So I think that when we help them to imagine they are under the water, when we help kids to imagine they bring the elephant in the room, when we help kids to see that they can actually be in power to rotate the sphere on their fingertips, and that's something that creates this broad understanding of the world and creates these limitless possibilities for creativity. Because those kids, this generation that is right now at school, this is the generation that will rule the world in a couple of decades. The interesting part here is that we need to support them with that knowledge. We need to keep their creativity, and we need to keep them being innovators in the field that they decide to go for.
Absolutely. And I think augmented reality is one of the tools that helps to both teachers and kids to know how to integrate technology strategically in the learning process and also how to apply those technologies into practice.
Yeah, so that's absolutely cool point. And what could be better if you can, if you don't have the opportunity, and it could be absolutely different situations. It could be like lockdown where you have to stay at home. It could be also the situation that you can't physically travel. If it could be the situation that you can't afford to travel. What could help you to explore other countries and to create this limitless thinking and limitless creativity and limitless innovation possibilities than the technologies like augmented and virtual reality? And that's one of the that's why we absolutely in love with the augmented reality as one of the tools that supports this, in my opinion, absolutely extremely important part of human possibilities. That's the creativity. This is something that cannot be taken away by any robots. It cannot be taken away by any artificial intelligence. Creativity and innovation, it's something that will drive the world forward.
Absolutely. And I think now we in times when we can't travel at all, and I think many are missing that, but we still, the time still passes. There's still a need to learn, to explore. And I think that's why augmented reality is such a cool thing as well, tool or resource that could be integrated. First of all, is to keep kids, kind of remind the kids that the world is extremely big, and there's an opportunity to explore it. However, we're all restricted now, and but having a piece of this, opportunity to actually interact and feel that one day we'll be able to travel again, I think it's quite an important aspect as well.
Yeah, and they need to understand that the world is extremely beautiful. And that's actually the example of how augmented reality from Cleverbooks supports learning about science and engineering and space.
But yes, now we're moving to space. We've spoken about the world, but now we're actually taking them to space.
Yeah, so you can sit at your home and you can still imagine that you are the person who's going to be traveling to space. You can build your own, you can assemble your own spaceship, and you can send it to the mission. You can select the mission to whatever you like, and you can imagine that you are traveling. And it doesn't matter if this spaceship is traveling around your room right now. In the future, it could be the case that it is actually traveling where in the real space and with the real spaceship. And that's, I think, the power of education and the power of technology, because they can deliver this opportunity for the kids to travel.
Absolutely, and the space exploration is on the roadmap, and it's coming. And one day we will be actually going. Everyone would be able to go into space. So I think giving the kids opportunity to learn about different planets, about the rocket science, about everything that is out there, and soon will actually become accessible. It's a fantastic opportunity.
And also, it's important to mention that augmented reality helps you to learn about the world around you. So you can see here, we are traveling right now together with you to Moscow, because we can see the St. Basil's Cathedral that is in the center of Moscow. And on the one side of the static picture is like a picture from the book. But on the other side, you can see the augmented version of the St. Basil's Cathedral, which you can rotate and look from absolutely different sides. And with the augmented reality, you can have this feeling that you have seen all those tiny windows and everything, and like you have been there. So this opportunity to create this virtual trip to discover the heritage around the world, to learn more about it, and then at the end of the day have the real trip there. This is a tremendous step forward in any education process. Ina, would you have any of your personal experiences? Because Ina has traveled a lot around the world. And when we were creating the 3D models for the heritage inside the Cleverbooks app, Ina was comparing them with the photos from her real album of travels.
Absolutely. And even it's not just for the kids an exciting part. Obviously, not so many families do have the opportunity to travel around the world and see different places. So for those kids, I think it's a great inspiration that one day they will grow up and they will have the opportunity on their own to travel the world and actually see all those beautiful places in reality. However, for example, for kids who have the opportunity to travel and see different places, it creates this, again, brings the memories back, great memories, exciting memories, and which plays a crucial role in remembering the material, what they're studying about. So having the opportunity to see that in front of your eyes and interact with you and be part of the environment, I think it's a great experience, learning experience.
So the important thing about augmented reality and that's an example of how we have supported at Clever Books during the pandemic and keep on supporting further, because we believe that it's important for kids to have the opportunity to learn with the newest technology. And that's why we have the tools that support them to explore the knowledge, to create and co-create together, and to collaborate within the augmented reality environments. And with this, I think the presentation is to the end, and we're open to any questions.
Well, thank you so much, guys. Alexander, thank you so much. That was a really, really interesting presentation. I wish I had the software when I was a kid.
I think
Me too.
It's such a cool way to make lessons more immersive and interactive. And like you said, the retention rate is much higher, which is also something we see with other training solutions for XR. So I think that's a really cool application. I don't see questions from the audience yet, so I can ask a question. So audience, please, give us your questions. Otherwise, I have a lot. Are you already using this in schools anywhere, or is it still in development?
We are using that in schools around the world. Ina can tell you the number because I'm more a product person in that sense. Yeah, we do use that in schools. We are running that. We're going to be running that in several different languages also in Europe. The interesting thing, I'm always wondering, and this is something I want to test because we just launched the new languages apart from English, if there's going to be any difference for kids. Because as far as I know, we use that in absolutely different countries where English is not even the first language, and it doesn't disturb the kids to use that and engage with the software and have interactive lessons. So Ina, over to you. How many countries?
We are present in 62 countries around the world with, I think, over 17,000 students using it, and in different schools and different grade levels. And it's actually the interesting point that you said about the languages, because by having such a great variety of schools where the solutions are used, they use more to help students learn English as a second language. And obviously there's a different perception of content where students don't have English as a native language. So it will be interesting to see the statistics of how that changes once the kids actually have the opportunity to interact with the same resources, but in their own native language.
Yeah, interesting. We get actually a question related to how you create the content.
Okay, that's a very good and interesting question. And thanks for asking. So the content is created not by us, because we're not in the pedagogy, we are not in any curricular building, but we have the team of educators from different curriculum that combine the contents together. So it's going to be relevant for the global curriculum-based guidelines, meaning that all of us studied in different schools in different countries, I bet. Right here, even between the speakers. But all of us know what is a sphere. We all know that there are several continents in the world. We know who is elephant, even if we haven't been to the zoo. We know the capitals of different countries we haven't visited. So meaning that there are different common areas between the curriculums. So we have a group of educators that actually combines that So we put the relevant curriculum. So our material, our apps are used as the supplementary material for any curriculum of the world.
Great, thank you. And do you have subjects where you say those subjects are a better fit for this kind of technology? When you showed some examples, but I can imagine like smaller kids learning to write, or like mathematics that doesn't have 3D images is more difficult than biology, for example. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, good. It's a good question. So we need to so augmented reality is a technology, right? So we need to step and think from this technology and what is the capabilities of this technology. The capabilities of augmented reality are really massive. So you can use different replications of geolocation for the field trips. You can use the different text and annotations. You can use implemented in the augmented reality field 3D objects, 2D objects, different quizzes and stuff like that. So application of technology depends on where you want to use it. So obviously anything that is visual is absolutely suitable for the augmented reality, right? Because augmented reality will support that, visualization that you can see from different sides. If it's possible to apply for learning, yeah, in some sense, you might be showing different animals or objects or something and saying like, hey, kitty, tell me what is this? And the kid can say, if it's going to be voice-enabled interaction with the AI technology, or the kid can type in and put in different letters that are missing in the word. Depends on how you can put it and from the instructional point of view. But in first place, in my opinion, augmented reality is the visualization. So any subject that could be visually represented, we are good to go. And especially for something like chemistry, for something like geometry, something that's absolutely abstract. And you say like, imagine the molecule of water. So all of us, I see by the face, we imagined water molecule straight away. Of course not, because we don't even remember how it looks like. It's H2O, and we don't remember, right? But because we saw that in the picture of the book, which was probably exactly that old as the school we studied in was old, or that book was used by our parents and something like that. So it didn't actually had that emotional connotation with the knowledge acquired, and that's why we don't remember. The augmented reality creates this emotional connection between learning and experiencing that learning. And that's why something that you experience through emotions creates better and long-term memory for that emotion. So that's the easy explanation where it works actually.
It's actually an interesting point about, for example, the science, that many schools don't have the labs to perform the science experiments, etc. So where augmented reality becomes a great tool to actually give the opportunity to students to experiment in the virtual environment. And for example, dissecting the frog, it's not just, for example, the schools would not have the material, but many kids actually can't do it physically. So again, bringing that experiment into the augmented reality creates this atmosphere of more tolerance from the kids' perspective to actually do something like that. So, and because now augmented reality started with content being created, so it was used to consume the content in an interactive way. But now augmented reality experience is moving into creation and collaboration mode, which means that students can create within the augmented reality environment and can fit any subject.
Yeah, interesting. Actually, I from my own experience, I've actually seen the same thing. Like I once built an AR application for also where there was a subject that the students basically had trouble grasping because it was too abstract, physics, electricity, and by making an AR version of it, they were suddenly like able to remember something much easier. So yeah, that's amazing.
I have also a question, actually.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Go ahead, Alexander.
Thanks. I'm just curious. I mean, in my scenario, I have a daughter with Down syndrome. So I I played around with a lot of XR technology, and I always have been thinking about what would be possible to create something to help her to educate. I'm just curious, where do you start with something like that? I mean, do you create a storyline up front? Um, yeah, I'm just curious.
Okay, that's a question that is near and dear to my heart. So I am working since last year on a massive project which I want to roll out globally. But this project is specifically connected of how augmented reality is helping the kids with special needs. And that includes the kids with the Down syndrome, with the autistic syndrome disorder. So any kids that might benefit from using this technology. And there is a methodology behind. So we put within a team together, and we're adopting those existing apps that we have to those kids, and we have also the extra apps created specifically for the kids with special needs. I need to share that with you, Alex. So you will
Definitely. I
yeah,
want
you
to
will.
try that out. No worries.
In some cases, the STEM subjects, they need a lot of repetition, and those kids would be just interacting on their own in many cases, by sitting and clicking on the same picture multiple times in order to learn something.
Yeah.
We're working together with the Down Syndrome Association, and they are pilot testing our solution, and they are rolling out that not only on the kids but also on the adults. They find it useful for them to enlarge vocabulary as well, and it helps them to understand the world better. But the important point, that's about the STEM in general, how the apps are adopted for that purpose. But there are specifically apps created to help those kids in different real life situations, like finding the way around when you're crossing the street, understanding how the supermarket can be loud and stuff like that. And also like learning different wardrobes and different actions, repeating those actions. There is a specific methodology and specific apps with this methodology behind for special needs, but some apps in terms of the STEM area, they can be used the way they are. But you're right that in some cases there must be a special touch. Do you have anything to add, Ina?
No, I think you've covered more or less aspects. And as Darya said, this is something that we are currently working on quite extensively, because there is an enlarged need, let's say, into building something like that.
It's going to be a big announcement.
It is good to hear that, because it's often a group of people who are mostly forgotten when you talk about education. It's like the same when, like doing tests. So there are only tests available for people without any disability, and they use the same test for people with a disability. Yeah. And then they start complaining that the child or the
big
person,
difference.
yeah.
And then, you know what? In my opinion, tests is a ridiculous thing invented by people. Because by tests, we are checking if the fish can fly. Okay? Not everybody is excellent in all the subjects. You can't test everybody the same way, you know? And we are essentially testing the same abilities, because somebody somewhere decided this is the standardized test. It needs to be this way. It doesn't matter. I might have imagination. I might have different understanding of the topic, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. And we are teaching at schools that this is wrong, and you need to make sure that you get that scoring that is designed by somebody sitting somewhere. So, but it's my opinion. I'm very much hated by this.
Thank you.
No. No, I think that's a very valid point. Yeah. I actually have one last question about thinking about kids and Corona, and all the kids are at home, they don't see their friends. So how cool would it be to actually be able to play with your friends in that kind of environment? Have you thought about doing that? Some kind of
absolutely. Absolutely, it's already in the progress, and that's what we referred when we said in regards to not just being able to consume the pre-designed content, not just create within the augmented reality, but we're talking now about co-creation as in the multiple players or also collaborating in the augmented reality environment, again, with multiple players. I think it's quite an important aspect because, again, it's not just about personalized learning anymore, but it's about creating collaboration projects, about learning how to collaborate, critical thinking in a collaborative environment, and giving the opportunity to actually the students to own the projects they have created themselves, and also the teamwork, which is an important aspect.
Yes.
Teamwork.
Yes.
And what is she saying is, like, in the simple words, it's just the augmented space where we all four of us, we can go in and we can start putting different animals, plants, building the houses, putting the streets, and building the city or the farm or something all together. And this project could be animated, and that's our own augmented reality that we have created. And I think that's the exciting part for all the kids today, because you learn something, but then you have your hands on doing something. And with learning by doing is one of the extremely important aspects, I believe.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I see there are no more questions from the audience. Alexander, do you have any left questions?
No. I had some questions, but actually they got answered while we were talking. So well, one of the questions, but you actually answered that already, was that I was curious if there's a difference. I think there's a difference, but how you take care of that, the difference in age when using AR for teaching, because I can imagine that for a child of 4, it's different than for a child of 10. Their interests are different.
Absolutely. And that was quite interesting because I personally conducted interviews, I think back in 2018, 2019, when this co-creation and collaboration in the augmented reality environment was still, just the beginning probably. I've spoken to educators and I asked them, okay, when is the time when students can actually consume the create, and when is the time when they're starting to interact and create the content? So it was quite interesting because they said that at the primary education, it's important for students to actually understand the basic concepts of how the content is created and why it's created that way. Because once they get those concepts and the structure and understanding, then they would be able, more likely in, let's say, middle school, they would be able to actually create their own projects, have the ownership of those projects, but they have a solid foundation on how that is done. And then obviously when they move to high school, then they have the opportunity to not just to create and more complex projects, but also teach younger students in why it's done that way and create the collaborative projects with the younger students as well.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you again so much for this really interesting talk. I think we learned a lot today, and well, thank you so much for joining us. And
you're extremely welcome, guys.
Absolute pleasure.
And well, see you maybe another time.
Absolutely.
Thank you
so much.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.